I think it's time we started talking about the elephant in the room. We all know the AAA game titles are supposed to be the best of the best, when in fact most games that are supposed to be AAA now, more often than not, end up failing to deliver on what they are promising, and that's a AAA experience. And anymore, it seems to go hand in hand with the idea if you have to tell somebody how good of a person you are, you're probably not that great of a person. And in regards to video games, if you have to tell somebody how great and amazing your video game is going to be, I have a feeling your video game is going to be absolute shit. And now that's not to say that all AAA games are going to be bad. There are many AAA games that have over-delivered and outperformed any expectations. But in the gaming market today, it seems more often than not, most of these AAA developers are more concerned with how much money they can make and how much money they can squeeze out of you instead of delivering an actual product that you are going to enjoy and recommend to other people. So why is it that now when I hear AAA game, I find myself almost disinterested? I'll have little to no excitement. And sure, you can chalk it up to me being older, getting a little bit jaded, having higher expectations of my entertainment, but I really don't think that this is the case. In my younger years, games shipped with problems. There were even problems with games that once they were released, they were released. There were no updates coming. You just bought the product and you got what you paid for, and it was either good or bad. But I don't remember there being this many bad games. And I guess saying that these games are quote-unquote bad is a little hyperbolic, but what I'm saying is that newer titles today don't seem to have the same quality as other titles released in the past that were highly anticipated. When I hear about a new AAA title coming out, I often find myself mentally just checking out, chalk it up as going to be another cash grab by a greedy company that doesn't care about the consumer and is more concerned with their bottom line and padding the profits made by shareholders.
I keep on seeing the same mistakes over and over and over, and it's always the quarterly profits.
And one doesn't have to look long and hard for examples of this. The recent release of Starfield by Bethesda shows that these companies don't care about the consumer. There were numerous reviews put out that were negative, pointing out the flaws in Starfield, only for Bethesda to go out and respond to these comments and respond to these reviews with automated messages telling us that we were playing the game wrong, we don't see the vision that they see, and we need to lower our expectations and accept the dribble that they're handing out to us $60, $70, $80 at a time. And I think a lot of the disdain that we are seeing as a whole in the gaming community for AAA games is the fact that these experiences that we're having in these games are no longer feeling new or fresh. They always end up feeling like recycled ideas from previous titles from the same developer. Often these developers take the safest route to what they know is going to make them money, whether that be a familiar IP, familiar mechanics, and overall gameplay loops that they know will keep players playing for hours on end. And it seems more and more, especially in the RPG sector of video games, that developers seem to think that lengthy playtime equates to a good game, when in fact, it doesn't. But really, what constitutes a game being good? For one, it is going to be a subjective opinion on what a good game is. Some games my friends will just absolutely adore, and I will bounce right off of it. And vice versa. There will be many games that I absolutely adore. I'll recommend to friends and they'll be like, man, this wasn't for me. This is just not a game that I see myself playing. How have you put 500 hours into this game? But I think there's a time where a lot of us as gamers are starting to come together and agree that there is some objective negativity in the gaming industry. One of the greatest of these, in my opinion, is the corporate greed that we're seeing from these developers. They no longer care about whether or not the experience is as good as it could be. They're more worried about making money. And more often than not, when the company is concerned more about the money than the game experience, the end result is usually lackluster and something that we soon forget and move on to the next title. But then if you take a look at games like Baldur's Gate 3 that was more focused on the user experience, it became one of the biggest games of 2023 and continues to have a large active player base in a single player game. Though it has multiplayer capabilities, the game still has an active presence on social media and places like TikTok, where people are still finding new and interesting ways to interact with the game and are just overall enjoying the experience, which then drives sales, which will allow Larian Studios to fund their next title. I want to preface this next bit without saying I have not done any of the research here. I don't know what the profit margins on video games are. I don't know how much like the CEO is making as opposed to the employee, how much is going out to certain stockholders of certain video games. But what I do know is that when the studio puts profit above all things, that means that somebody at the top is making a lot more money that isn't then being put back into the system that would then generate more quality games, and also better pay for the people that are actually creating the game instead of the people just running the business at the top. And I understand these companies have to pay their employees, they have to pay the people that are making these games. But if the profit margins are so great that they can't pay these employees a proper wage in order to make these video games, then where's the incentive to do a good job in making the video game? You can be passionate about something all you want, but there comes a time when you put so much time and effort into it, and the reward for doing so doesn't equal to the time and effort that you've put in.
The only thing that matters is the numbers. And then you fire everybody, and then like next year you're going to say, shit, I'm out of developers, and you're going to start hiring people again, and then you do acquisitions, and then you put them in the same loop again, and it's just been broken and broken and broken. You don't have to.
I'm going to just put this out there. This might be a hot take. Honestly, I think any and all microtransactions should stop. It should be ceased. It should be a done deal. They should have never been done. Yet another thing that I think we can blame Bethesda for, because I think it all started with a little horse armor DLC. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, pretty sure it started with that horse armor DLC. And I would like to clarify that when I say microtransactions, I don't mean DLC, something that you're going to get a larger amount of content for. When DLC is supplemental to the overall game experience, where you're getting more content and more gameplay hours that are fun and engaging, I don't have a problem with that. Had Larian Studios moved forward and actually given us extra content within the world of Baldur's Gate 3, so say they put out a DLC, which they're not going to do. We've heard since that Sven Vink of Larian Studios has said, no, we were working on one, but our heart wasn't in it. And I respect that. If your heart's not into something, you know you're not going to make the best thing that you can make. But had they created DLC, I wouldn't want the story to extend beyond what we already had. I would have just liked it to have injected more side content, more things that we could have done to explore, maybe boost the level cap just a little bit as a bonus for going through all of that content. DLC in that regard, I think, is fine, and I will gladly pay for it for extra experience. But where I draw the line on microtransactions is when it's just like these little cosmetics, these little things that they nickel and dime you to death that you really don't need for the overall experience of the video game. Now, don't get me wrong, costumes are cool, skins are cool, bonus weapons are cool, but why not just make those part of the game? Maybe make them unlockable due to quests or other things. And of course, you'll hear the arguments like, oh, well, what if somebody doesn't have the time to grind out the necessary stuff to get this stuff? Well, you're not going to like my answer. I'm going to say tough shit. Not every video game needs to have everything accessible to every player. And I would like to clarify that that's not the same as giving accessibility to video games through like alternative controller support so somebody with a disability can play a video game. But what I'm saying is in terms of giving somebody an easy mode for a Souls-like game. The overall experience that the developers of a Souls-like game want you to have for that game is to overcome the difficulty of the game, not to make it easier and more acceptable to everybody, because then it loses the spirit of the game and it's not a Souls-like game. So if the Souls games are too hard for you, and this isn't me saying get good, I suck at those games. I'm terrible at them. It took me countless hours to get through Dark Souls 1, never finished Dark Souls 2 or 3. So what I'm saying is that game is just not for me. I can watch it and enjoy it from the sidelines, watch other people play it, absorb the lore through YouTube videos, and overall enjoy it at a distance, but those games aren't for me, and that's okay. It's okay that games aren't for you. That alone is one of the other reasons that a lot of AAA games are starting to fail us as an entertainment medium, And that is because they are being watered down. They are trying to cater to the masses. They want mass appeal for the larger volume of sales. And I think that's doing the game a disservice when you water things down to make it better for the overall monetary gain. You are losing on the end of the creativity. You're losing on the end of the overall vision. Let's take the Dark Souls analogy. So let's say that they watered it down. A lot of the appeal, and I understand this because, like I said, I've finished Dark Souls 1, I believe 3 times. I've finished 3 full playthroughs of Dark Souls 1. The enjoyment that you're going to get from Dark Souls 1, the spirit that is embodied in those games, is overcoming that difficulty, overcoming those obstacles, and that's the reward, that little hit of dopamine you get when you finally beat that boss that has just been bending you over the sofa and giving it to you raw. You finally beat them, that elation that you feel, that's part of that gameplay's experience. And if you were to water it down and make it easy and more accessible for players, you're going to lose that experience. And before I start sliding down a slippery slope where it starts to sound like I'm making excuses for the get good scrub crowd that I absolutely detest in the first place in any gaming situation, let's move this on to talk about like Bethesda games. Now, Bethesda games, when I first started getting into them, and when I say Bethesda games, I mean like the mainline franchises, and of course that being originally the Elder Scrolls games. My first experience with an Elder Scrolls game was Morrowind. Now, a lot of reasons a lot of people didn't like Morrowind when it first came out is because it was an RPG. There were a lot of stats, there were a lot of things that you had to manage. And overall, a lot of times people would just say there's just too much going on. There's too many statistics, there's too many abilities, it's too much for me, I just can't handle it. Then, over the course of time through Oblivion and then Skyrim, those mechanics and those, deep statistical builds that you kind of had to go into in older RPGs, which a lot of older RPGs are known for, not just Bethesda games, slowly got watered down into Skyrim, where you had a simplified skill tree and 3 stats to choose from when leveling up. You were either going to level your stamina, your magicka, or your health. And that was it. Now, me personally, loving the deeper RPG mechanics, the longer I played into these, the franchise, I was enjoying them less. And that stems from that watering of down for the mass appeal. It's often been said that when you make something for everybody, you make it for no one. And I feel that that is absolutely true in video games. And when developers are watering down for the sake of mass appeal, more often than not, they also end up losing innovation for the sake of safety. They know what sells. They know what people are going to buy, so they continue to put it out. And of course, that's not to say that doing the same thing over and over again isn't bad, but when there's little to no innovation from one title to the next, it seems to feel like it's more of a greedy cash grab than it is anything else. Overall, I feel that AAA gaming has just lost any amount of respect for the player's time, their money, and I feel some of the greatest experiences that we're having in gaming to date are coming from so-called AA developers and indie developer studios. Where in the past my wish list of games would be coming from AAA studios are now being filled with indie games that are being developed by people that are trying to inject as much fun and enjoyment into their game as possible, respecting the player's time and giving them an overall better experience in my opinion. But let's face it, AAA means absolutely nothing anymore, and is often a term bandied around by developers who think their shit doesn't stink, but yet their heads and their egos are so big that they don't even fit in the room with us. And as I stated previously, yes, there are games that are given the AAA label and that they do meet those expectations. But let's face it, in 2024, where the idea of AAA should mean that this game is of high quality and should give us a AAA experience, it ends up being a letdown. So let's demand better of these AAA studios. Let's make them earn that title of AAA that they bandy around so haphazardly. Let's hold them accountable to that title that they use. Let's hold them accountable to making AAA quality games. And with that, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. All of your support helps, when you like and you subscribe, all of that stuff, which I really, really appreciate. I couldn't be doing this without all of you sitting here watching this video today. But until next time, nerds, stay weird, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.